Libs are on life support after the total and complete cultural victory of UFC 250 on the White House lawn. Now it's time to declare victory by going on an offensive war against the left and their culture that is dying. We are in control. Patriots in control on the set of The View. What is the most diseased temple of the left? Well, two pillars. One, on the West Coast, you have the Jimmy Kimmel Show. On the East Coast, you have The View. You used to have the Colbert Show. We've knocked that one off. Jimmy Kimmel's next. And The View is the last sacred spot for libtard thinking to flourish and to do so unchallenged. That all ended today as J.D. Vance created memes the second he walked on set. Total victory, new meme template here. J.D. Vance, ladies and gentlemen, walking on a show that is losing in ratings to Fox News, by the way. Insiders say that Disney bosses are declaring that it has gotten too political on The View. In fact, they're being sued by the FCC. The FCC may look to shut down The View because they are such a political propaganda show. The White House said The View should be canceled following Joy Behar anti-Trump tirade. Of course, they do this with regularity because they consider themselves a news show, a straight news show. That's not true. They never invite Republicans on. In fact, in order to get sort of the lavish goodies that are provided to The View by the taxpayers, they must invite Republicans on. Those are the rules. And so they have to say yes when someone like J.D. Vance comes rolling up to The View. Here he is, ready to go in downtown Manhattan. J.D. Vance rolling deep as the women of The View applaud with roars for J.D. Vance. Well, this is insane. Listen.
Vice President of the United States, J.D. Vance.
Wasn't expecting that. I mean, it's polite. All these women stand up, shake his hand. You can see some frowning and nastiness there. But all in all,
the Vice President.
A welcome greeting, and J.D. Vance roasted them to their faces the second he sat down. Listen to this.
I was surprised at how tall you were. He's very tall.
If you only see somebody on TV, you just see their, in my case, giant heads. So it hides how tall I am.
Yeah.
That's right.
We are the table of big heads here.
So this is a show of MAGA Republicans, right? That's what my media team told me. Okay, good.
Well, we'll find out.
I haven't seen Whoopi Goldberg grin this big since she was invited on Jeffrey Epstein's plane to fly to France. Please bring that up. Please, JD, bring it up. Well, he did actually roast Whoopi Goldberg a couple of times. Here we go. This is J.D. Vance dismantling the lunatics of The View when they try to deny that countries are sending violent criminals through Biden's open
things Donald Trump said. Fundamentally, that one of the things I underappreciated about Donald Trump is that so many of the things that people said about him weren't actually true. Again, you talk about humility. Okay, so I see Donald Trump, I see a clip of him, or I see not even a clip of him, but reporting about something that he said, and I take it at face value. For example, let's just go back to one of the most controversial things Donald Trump said during the first term that I was wrong during the first campaign, is that I was led to believe by the stories. I read stories that said Donald Trump said that all Mexicans were rapists. He never said that. What he said is that the certain South American countries, Central American countries were releasing criminals into our country, including Mexico. By the way, that was objectively true. So it's not so much Christians.
Fidel Castro did that in 1980 with the Mariel boat lift. There have been many journalists, including CNN, where you used to work and be my colleague, that have tried to find evidence of that. There is no evidence that Maduro was releasing people from insane asylums or jails like Fidel Castro did do. This was made up. And we just can't, accept it without pushing back.
And we know that there were people who were released from prisons who were encouraged to come into the United States.
It wasn't like it wasn't the Mariel, Mr. Vice President. It wasn't where it was like a purposeful release, open up the jails, open up the insane asylums, and let people flood Florida. I lived through that in Miami.
If you go, it may not have been like Mariel, but if you go back to the caravans that were happening in 22, 23, we know that those things were funded. They were in some ways supported by the government.
There was absolutely
so I don't know how you define support or not support, but if people are encouraged to come into our country after having spent time in prison by their own governments, I think that's a problem.
This is the kind of commentary that's going to win it for J.D. Vance. This is how J.D. Vance approached his debate with Tim Walz. I was wondering what kind of energy he'd carry through on The View. You know, you've seen Don Jr., for instance, on The View go scorched earth, calling out Joy Behar for wearing blackface, calling out Whoopi Goldberg for defending child pederast Roman Polanski. That's a fact. They did those things. It's empirical. We have the evidence. We have the photos. They did them. It's despicable. They never apologized for it. Whoopi Goldberg is in the Epstein files. All the women of The View are in the Epstein files in one way or another. Anyway, the point is that like J.D. Vance didn't bring the scorched earth energy. He's bringing the debate energy to this, and he did such a great job with his answer. And listen to this. He's asked about like, what about children in cages, right? Oh, you mean the thing Barack Obama did? Listen to this answer.
You talk about the children. Here's what I'd say. Do we know that during the last administration, we had tens of thousands of children who were sex trafficked by the cartels, who were brought into our country in profoundly dangerous and predatory conditions?
Let's talk about this administration.
But here's the point. Unless you enforce the border, you invite that kind of conduct. You think that our immigration policies are inhumane based on the reporting of one person with a political bias. What I'm telling you is that it's inhumane to allow cartels to sex traffic people across our border.
And by the way, please hold on.
I appreciate that. We're going to get you back, Anna.
We're coming back.
You talk.
That's where the meme comes from. And it wasn't, look at that. Dirty longhouse, wicked, evil, feminist, passive aggressive. So nasty. And it lost. It lost. Americans hate that energy. They love this energy. Whoopi Goldberg tried to claim that Trump is casting aside black people, and J.D. Vance goes, what exactly are you talking about? There's like, I don't know. There's like so many
of information of black heroes. How does that sit with you?
Well, what exactly are you talking about, Whoopi? Because you just, I know Emmett Till was the kid. No, I want to know what she's.
You don't know what I'm talking about.
Actual point.
So in a lot of the museums, there's so many. Where they're taking down the actual history that happened in this country. Slavery happened. All kinds of stuff happened, and it seems that it has been very easy for this administration to remove that and also to denigrate black folks who have worked their behinds off to get this American dream. How do you, I mean, you know better.
So Sonny, that was actually a very helpful intervention, because I think the story you're talking about is where.
So J.D. Vance goes on to say, no, I don't think you are getting your information from people that are telling you the truth, and details how the president's administration is doing the exact opposite of what they said. Man, not prepared for J.D. Vance to calmly explain to them why every single narrative they believe about the Epstein files and what Whoopi Goldberg just said is wrong. Vance on The View, you can tell they hate it. Vance is unleashing on The View. Cackling Karens are livid. I'll leave you with this answer. Just an excellent breakdown from J.D. Vance. This is like masterclass textbook stuff. And it looks like JD is going scorched earth on this whole 2028 run. This is how you do it. This is how you get back in the bloodstream, and how you also, I think, differentiate yourself a little bit from President Trump. It's obviously a very different style. We all know what President Trump would do on The View. He would bring a lit flamethrower. Here's J.D. Vance doing maybe the same thing, but like way more politely.
Things that are totally missing context. Well, here's what I'll say. So, number one, I am frankly, kind of a conspiracy theory on the Epstein stuff. And that story says that that's one of the things that's true, is that some people called me a conspiracy theory on the Epstein stuff.
Called you a conspiracy
and I love Susie, but absolutely, she thinks I'm a conspiracy theorist on the Epstein stuff, because I think that it's crazy that you had this guy who is clearly a sex predator who is hanging out with a lot of very wealthy and powerful people. Like, that really bothered me. I don't know what's there, of course. Nobody knows exactly what happened unless you were there, but that really bothered me, and I wanted to have full transparency. What I disagree with is the idea that the White House wasn't committed to full transparency. We have to remember, like, I was inside the room when some of these decisions were made. The Epstein Files Transparency Act, the one that the president signed, the one that led to all these files that we're seeing, the emails. By the way, again, sorry, Joe, I do have to defend my boss. I know you guys don't always appreciate this, but, you know, one of the things you see in the Epstein emails is that Jeffrey Epstein hated Donald Trump, and that Donald Trump literally reported Jeffrey Epstein to the police.
Okay,
that's one of the things that came out of these files.
They were best friends for about a decade. And remember, he signed that Transparency Act under duress when some Republican women, congresswomen like Lauren Boebert, like Marjorie Taylor Greene, did not give in to his pressure of not signing. He brought Lauren Boebert into the Situation Room to pressure her into caving on not voting for that bill.
So let me respond to that. So
that's all true.
Let me respond to that. So number one is, yes, Donald Trump, and he said this, he knew Jeffrey Epstein back in the 1980s. He also threw Jeffrey Epstein out of his club when he found out he was a creep and reported him to the police. That's something that the media often misses when it reports this story. They tell the fact that they knew each other in the 80s, which the president himself admits. They ignore the fact that he narked on him to the police and led ultimately to JeffreyEpstein's downfall. To that point, Anna, you know the Republican Party. Well, it's one of the things that led to law enforcement investigation. But on the point that you made,
it was allegedly over a real estate deal that they got into a fight over.
But the email says actually
they didn't just know each other. Let's just be truthful and transparent here. They didn't just know each other. They were incredibly close friends.
He reported him to the police. That's what I'm saying. That is objective. That is objectively true. But Anna made another point that I think Whoopi, if I may, because Anna made a very important point. This question about, did Donald Trump release these files only under duress from Republicans? And Anna, you know the Republican Party probably better than I do. The idea that Donald Trump runs around afraid of Republican congressmen as opposed to the other way around is kind of crazy.
Well, it was a bipartisan, it was Republicans and Democrats.
But because the Republicans control the House and the Senate, particularly the Senate, you need the Republican sign-off. What the president did is, look, I will say this. Again, I was in there in the meetings. He was very frustrated that the Democrats were making this about him when he's like, look, I threw the guy out of my club. I am the guy who reported him to the police, or one of the people who reported him to the police. The president was frustrated about that, absolutely. But he eventually came to say, you know what? Let's just get everything out there. Let's have this out in the public. And he actually called the senators. I was there. He called the senators and said, you know what? Pass this bill, I'll sign it, and that was it.
Well, then let me follow up briefly. Let me follow up briefly.
Yes.
It sounds like you believed that there would be men in the files who would be held accountable, right?